All right, let's talk about something that quite literally powers our entire world, energy. It's in everything we do every single day. But have you ever really stopped to think about where it all comes from? Or, maybe more importantly, what happens if our main sources just run out? We're going to dive into our energy dilemma.
I mean, just think about your morning, right? Your alarm clock goes off, you flip on the light switch, you jump into a hot shower, maybe you grab a bus to work. Every single one of those steps is powered by energy. It's so deeply woven into our lives that we barely even notice it's there.
And we're not just talking small scale. We're talking about the massive, sprawling grid that lights up our cities at night. But it's also the simple solar panel on a single roof, just quietly heating up water for a bath. Energy is everywhere, from the gigantic to the personal. But here's the thing, all that power has to come from somewhere.
And it turns out, when you really break it down, all our energy sources fall into two very different buckets. You could call them the two paths of power, and they lead to completely different futures.
Okay, check this out because this is a perfect way to think about it. Imagine two big water tanks. In the first tank, every time you take a cup of water out, the rain just instantly fills it back up. The water level never, ever drops. That's renewable energy. Now look at the second tank. You take out a huge bucket of water, but only a few drops drip back in. The level just keeps falling and falling. That's non-renewable. See the difference? One is sustainable, and the other, well, it's running out.
So, let's start with that first tank, the one that magically refills itself. These are the energy sources that nature can replenish, giving us what feels like a totally endless supply of power.
And first up is the big one, the ultimate power source, the sun. We've gotten really clever about how to harness its energy. You've got solar heaters, which is super simple. They just use black surfaces to soak up heat and warm water. And then, of course, there are the solar panels you see everywhere, turning that sunlight directly into electricity.
But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, literally. On the one hand, solar is amazing. It's renewable, the sun's not going anywhere, and you can make money from it. But on the other hand, the batteries you need to store that power for a rainy day are super expensive. And speaking of cloudy days, they definitely reduce how effective it is. Plus, getting rid of those old batteries can cause pollution. It's a trade-off.
You know what else we have to thank the sun for? Wind. It's actually a really simple idea. The sun heats our planet, but it does it unevenly. So some spots get hotter, that hot air rises, and it creates a low-pressure area. Then cooler air from nearby rushes in to fill that space. And that rush of air? That's wind. Pretty cool, right?
The upside to wind is huge. We're talking no air pollution and way less damage to the environment. But there are catches. You can't just put a wind turbine anywhere. You need to be in a place that gets enough consistent wind. And for people who live nearby, those giant generators can create a lot of noise pollution. All right, now for something completely different. We're going deep, like deep inside the Earth for geothermal energy. The idea here is to use the planet's own internal furnace. Way down below us, magma heats up underground water, turning it into powerful steam. We can drill down, pump that steam up to the surface, and use it to spin a turbine and generate electricity.
So yeah, it's a pretty brilliant concept, using heat that's already there for the taking. But the challenges are significant. It costs an absolute fortune to drill that deep, and when you do, you can accidentally let hazardous gases and chemicals seep up to the surface. And then you've got this chemical waste that's really tough to get rid of safely. And for our last renewable, let's talk about the incredible power of moving water. With hydropower, you build a dam to create this huge reservoir of water. Then you channel that water through tunnels. The sheer force of it flowing through spins these massive turbines, which are hooked up to generators. It's like a giant water-powered machine.
While it's generally considered green, and it's definitely profitable, hydropower has some serious drawbacks. Building these dams costs a staggering amount of money. Creating the reservoir completely floods the existing ecosystem, destroying animal habitats. Over time, that reservoir fills up with silt and becomes less effective. And of course, the whole thing depends entirely on getting enough rain to keep the reservoir full.
Okay, so we've seen the tank that never runs dry. Now let's go back and look at that other tank, the one that's slowly but surely draining away. These are the non-renewable sources, the finite fuels. Once they're gone, they are gone for a very, very long time.
And that brings us to the big one, fossil fuels. We're talking mineral oil, coal, and natural gas. All of this stuff is formed from the remains of ancient plants and animals that got buried and then cooked under intense heat and pressure for millions of years. And that's the key phrase right there, Millions of years. We can't just whip up a new batch.
So if they're running out, why do we use them so much? Well, they pack a huge energy punch, and they're super easy to use with all the machines we've already built. But the cons are planet-sized. The supply is limited, and it will run out. And burning them, as we all know, releases pollutants into our atmosphere.
The other major non-renewable source is nuclear power. This is some seriously powerful stuff. In a nuclear reaction, you're essentially taking one type of atom, like uranium, and forcing it to change into another. When that happens, it releases a truly mind-boggling amount of energy.
And this right here, this brings us to maybe the most extreme trade-off of all. The upside is its incredible efficiency. You get a vast amount of energy from a tiny bit of fuel. But the disadvantages are, frankly, terrifying. The plants are unbelievably expensive to build and maintain. The process creates highly toxic waste that we have to store safely for thousands of years. And as we saw with disasters like Chernobyl and Fukushima, when things go wrong, they go catastrophically wrong.
So there you have it. The two paths are laid out in front of us, the endless supply and the finite fuel. And understanding this isn't just some interesting science lesson, This is about a choice we all have to make. Because seriously, the clock is ticking.
So, how much time is left on that clock? Well, based on how much we're using right now, our global supply of mineral oil, the stuff that runs our cars, our trucks, our planes, is estimated to last for just 50 years. 50.
What about natural gas, the stuff that heats a lot of our homes and cooks our food? We've got a little more runway there, about 70 years. But think about that. That's not some distant sci-fi future. That is well within the lifetime of children being born today. And coal, which is our most abundant fossil fuel, that buys us a bit more time, around 250 years. Now, that might sound like a lot, but in the grand scale of human history, it's just a blink of an eye. The bottom line is, the runway for all of these finite fuels eventually comes to an end.
So what do? Look, this isn't about doom and gloom. It's about being smart. It's about taking action. And there are really simple things we can all do. We can be more mindful of our electricity use at home. We can walk or bike for short trips instead of driving. We can take public transit. We can look into things like solar water heaters. Even just using less plastic makes a difference, because it takes fuel to make that stuff. The biggest thing is awareness and just deciding to conserve.
Because at the end of the day, that's what this all comes down to. Choices. Every kilowatt we use, every trip we take, it's a choice. We've seen the two paths laid out before us, one that replenishes itself and one that just ends. The choices we make, together, will literally define the world we leave behind. So the only real question left is, what will your choice be?